Good morning, everybody. My name is Dmitry Bezrukov, founder of IT Secura. Today we'll review WordPress security hardening. Do you prefer regret over prevention? A lot of people prefer not to address security until it's too late. In general, cybersecurity is minimizing of security risk that something bad can happen, and assurance that you're able to recover from whatever happens. So there's no such thing as 100% security, but you can get pretty close to it. And the more you invest into it, the more security you have. It is financial or time investment, and even initial small steps towards security can give great results. Maybe 20% of efforts could give you already 80% of security. So it is encouraging, because as soon as you start making any steps towards security, it already improves dramatically. Percentage from 99% of security versus 99.9%, it's you actually spend way much more resources on it, and the difference is not as much. So what could happen to your website? Defacing of your website, especially if competitors ordered to deface your website. We have seen a conversion to porn site. Sometimes hacker, after hacking your server, your website, they can install CryptoMiner or other malware installations there and start attacking other servers from your hosting server. That's fairly common. That's one of the needs. Also, they're hacking everybody these days. Additional strange pages around your website for malicious SEO purposes. So, for example, your website could be there, but hackers create additional pages which you don't see online when you go to your website. You'll see it on an admin interface because suddenly strange pages appear, but online you would not see. And the hackers get creative. They first hack and then decide what to do with it. For them, it's all automated. It's not a manual process. They have infected servers, infected desktops, which are attacking your computer based on a program, on algorithm which hackers constantly refine. And of course, if you store any data, sensitive data on the website, that data can be leaked. In general, security refers to availability, confidentiality, and integrity. Availability is that your information on your website is available. Confidentiality is that who can read information on the website, especially if it's not public website. And then integrity, who can modify your site. Let us analyze your log for free. So if you don't believe me that your website is under constant attack, we can do heavy lifting. If you submit logs to us, we can analyze it and show you the attacks. Without logs, we cannot see it, but with the logs, we can dig in it and find useful information. If you ever seen the logs, they're not human readable. You almost need to get used to it. They are in technical language, they're digits and numbers in English. From that point of view, they're readable. But when they're so big and there's so much information there, so it's hard to catch what are you looking at and what are you looking for. The fact that you don't know that attacks are happening, most likely you maybe didn't have to, doesn't mean that attacks are not happening. So security is based on knowledge, not on ignorance. And a lot of smaller companies prefer not to know it because security is still a complex subject. Also, to improve security, simple steps are required. So feel free to attach your logs. If you go to our security consulting page on itsecure.com, there is a link to upload your logs for security analysis. Here's a Wordpress network statistics and just some numbers for you. So in each day this month, they recorded around 400 million attacks. Not totally sure how they count what is attack for them. Maybe it's just brute force attack, somebody or some other bad request, which is clearly marked as malicious. So this is a staggering number. It's still, even if it's not a number of attacking IPs, it's a number of attacks, it's still 400 million a day. And it's pretty much doubled from a year ago. So we could see just constant threats that attacks are not less, there are more. So what kind of top malicious requests we see on our servers? We analyze, we watch our servers, we watch logs and watch for malicious requests. So one of the ways how you can see malicious requests, when a web server replies that page doesn't exist or it's forbidden, it's web server request 4.4 and 4.3 for those corresponding errors. You can judge that actually it's malicious because some of the requests like vplogin.php, this is a valid login URL. Only after we remove it from there, we hide it under different URL and placed under that one as 4.4 error, we could see how much hackers actually trying to attack it. And so this month, up to date, 24,000 of those requests has been made on our servers. The second most attack is XML RPC. So this is actually a second programming way to authenticate in your WordPress. Many people don't know that it exists because it's a programming way. So it's when it's not a graphical interface, it's another program trying to connect to it. It's fairly old. It's going to be removed at some point towards API. And yet it's right now it's more security risk than any function in place. So we'll be looking at disabling it or removing whole file together because it does exist there. And currently, right now, it allows brute force attacks to be even more automated for hackers. So both of those top requests, this refers to login security. So somebody is trying to log into your WordPress site and get access to it. By the way, I don't consider most of our sites are any sensitive information, but anybody get attacked like this. And we also see distinction. Hackers know where web hosting servers are. They can use servers like Shodan and some other search engines for the hackers just to be able to attack only web hosting servers, for example. There is an amazing division of responsibility within the hacking community. Some people just classify assets, what they see online. Other people break it, and other people can use broken credentials to infect your computer. So there's a big division of labor there. Then you see options tried on CGI bin. It's preparation for attack, what they can do with the scripts. Get.environment, This is used for some applications to store fairly sensitive data. It's like database credentials, and so. And hackers, of course, know that. They study what they can attempt. And if server is misconfigured and this file is accessible for web server to serve, they'll get the information. And they're already a next step into hacking. The next stop request also equal 1. It's not intuitive. Why would they issue such requests? But then if you think of it, every author who produced a post on website, it's publicly available. You can go to the post and see who wrote it. And then obviously you can guess the username. So it is part of the login security that actually hackers trying to guess what users you have on the server, and then already trying to brute force. Brute force is an attack where hackers just keep trying to log in to a website. He doesn't know your credentials, but it's trying to brute force into your website by trying many times. And computers can try several attempts a second. So eventually, if you have a weak password or weak authentication, they'll break in. And then already they'll do what they can or what they want. So some other malicious request examples. For example, they're trying to get to your config PHP file. It's also, if it's misconfigured, it can be potentially served to hackers. And of course, in that file, there are your credentials for database. And once site is publicly open, which it doesn't have to be, first of all, publicly open, you can restrict access in many different ways. But once it's open, hackers will attempt to scan websites and try to generate and guess very specific requests. The second one, zip file, they're trying to guess and trying to get your backup of your site. In case you zipped or archived your site for backup purposes, and you try to download it from there, and you forgot to delete the zip archive from there. So they're actually trying to guess, and sometimes they're very specific with domains, how you might code that file that they attempt to get it. The same with the second one, db local db.zip. So it is another attempt, and they keep going right now. Like even on your site could be right now, trying to guess those. After they get your backup, they actually can see your configurations for database. And then already they're yet closer step to compromise of your site, because maybe then there is a PHP admin to log into your database and so forth. And they try to get to files, uploads, trying to figure out other PHP files which exist, and they keep going. If you don't stop them, they don't stop, because for them, it's all automated. So some requests we understand, some other requests, I don't quite understand the logic yet, but I'm sure there is a logic. Like, for example, in the last months, suddenly we see this request AB2G or AB2H. At the bottom, you see those requests. And we see it on many servers, and suddenly it started. So it means hackers discover some vulnerabilities in some software, improved the script, and now they're trying on all other servers, trying to figure out which server has this software and how they can compromise it. And on some servers, after 344 requests, we would block the IP already, because we clearly mark it as a malicious already. valid sites can have 404 page non-existent requests. And that's where tricky part starts on shared web hosting servers, where a lot of people have their sites and not everybody careful enough and not to have 404 valid 404 errors on their site. Because if there is an image missing, it's generating 404. So on shared web servers, we actually cannot block after only 3 404 errors. We have to allow for more. I know it's a lot of information, and security is it's complex, and we're trying to present it in accessible manner. We do harden websites for people, but right now, since you're attending a webinar, you decided to learn it yourself, how to do it. And we're happy to share. It is knowledge required and some experience, but it's all very simple. And anybody can do it. So I divided security in 3 different areas. First area is static security hardening. It's what you do when you prepare your site for online. Hopefully before it gets online, but anytime after, before incident happened, it's already better. So for login security, we'll talk more a little bit, and it's a complex subject and it's primary target for hackers. There are some other things, and right now we'll talk in generic, and later we'll be actually logging into your WordPress. You will log in and we'll go step by step. We'll do just maybe 5 different steps, but it will improve your website today. So another thing is file permissions. There are different files WordPress has and different sensitivity, like config file, it's some sensitivity to protect it. And file permissions, it's particularly applies to hosting on Linux, but it's permissions what different users can do on the file system. I know it gets a little bit advanced here, but some plugins make it very easy. They know what those permissions should be, and you just need to click on some things to create correct permissions for file systems. Like disabling code execution in your upload directory. Why is that needed? Because hacker can attempt to upload something to your website through any form you can have, and then we'll try to execute it. Anti-spam setup. There are multiple plugins available to improve your anti-spam setup, recapture, and we'll go through some of it. Configure automatic daily backups for database and files. So this is where I cannot stress enough importance of backups. And automated backups and daily backups, ideally. And keep a history of backups. I'll keep referring to backups because this is actually how you're going to recover after security incidents, if anything happens. If you don't have a backup, you'll have to clean up infection manually. You'll have to look how they did it, which files got modified, try to restore it to an original state. And it's much easier if you have daily backups. Hackers, of course, there is a waiting period. After they infect your site, they actually wait until your backups turn around, and if you don't have a backups anymore. For example, if you only store last 7 days of backups, for sure hackers are patient, and they will wait until your backups rotate and you don't have any more history of backups to recover to a good version. So this is why the length of a history of backups is very important. Like ideally, you can have it actually for a whole year, but it's rarely that providers or you will configure something like this. But don't configure it less history than 30 days, because we see they wait 2-3 weeks until they actually start doing something malicious. And only then you understand that something happened. You try to look for backups, and backups are already overwritten and you don't have the latest. And it's good to have multiple forms of backups, even manual backups on your desktop. So backups is a big subject, but it needs to be addressed. Hide your WordPress version. Why is that important? Because hackers, they watch vulnerabilities in core files of WordPress. They're in business for hacking, and they are actually much more proactive than anybody else if new vulnerability comes out publicly. And by the time everybody else patch the version, they're already able to exploit a lot of sites. So if you don't show your WordPress version, they actually don't know which version you have, and they cannot quite understand, okay, what vulnerabilities your WordPress site has. Just remember, it's all automated for them. All they need to do to tweak their code once, and then the same code is trying to break all the sites. Another thing you can do is change database table prefix. By default, table prefix in the database, it's WP_. And hackers know that. And if they attempt to do SQL injection attack, where they embed some SQL database query in the request, they actually able to get those tables. And in different ways also, if you hide this prefix of database tables, it will improve your security. Disable WordPress plugin or schema editor via code, via dashboard. So hackers, if they log into your WordPress, they're able to break in. They actually will infect some of the plugins and some of the codes through WordPress interface. If you disable this login to theme editor, you need to actually, to edit any theme, you need to log in through other cPanel or PHP, through FTP or SSH, and modify the files on the file system, not through web interface, but through the file system. And hackers, if they hack web interface, they can modify these files through the editor, which is usually, it's not good what they infect. It's hard to make this presentation spicy, but we keep going. After static security, there is a security audit scanning. It's different plugins offer this functionality of scanning, and they're scanning for malware, they're scanning for monitoring file integrity, which files got changed recently, which if your file WordPress gets compromised, you actually need to know, okay, which files got recently modified. You can see it in your cPanel account or on a file system, just sort it and figure out which files, but also some plugins can help you with that. Those tools also scan for malicious link inside the comments, newly created admin users, trying to detect skins and plugins for known vulnerabilities. And if those plugins are out of date, you need to update them. For weak passwords and more. So this is what referred by regular scanning. After you did static hardening, then there is this regular scanning, whether you do it daily, weekly, it's based on configurations already. And then there is a dynamic operational security, where it's not at given interval already you do the scan. It's actually live how it's happening right now. There are some rules updated for web application firewall, or you block IPs and bad blocks, updates for new malware definitions, or you want to watch live traffic monitoring to see what's happening right now on your server. Because all of this data, you remember, it's not hidden, but it's hidden in the logs, which you need to look at and see what's happening. But some plugins allow you to actually see what's happening on your site currently, which requests happening, and which fail or successful authentications are happening right now, and has a record of it. So even you set up login security before, you still, the next layer is still, it's good if you review it once in a while for successful and failed authentication, just to see whether other layers of security are failing. And then the plugins can have additional features like stopping user enumeration, where hacker is trying to guess the user one by one and trying to log into your site. And reviewing daily backup status. Again, backup, good that you configured it. You just need to make sure that they're running on daily basis. Login security. So this is from static security. It was just one line for login security. And you can do many different things. And it's a primary target for hackers to log into your WordPress and change things. So you can change login URL for WordPress. You can actually hide it, that only you know and other admins know what this URL is, and it's not a default location as usual. This is a very powerful, and we'll do this on webinar with you. Even if you just do this improvement, it already will improve your security dramatically. And of course, you can do many other things for login security, enforcing strong passwords, using two-factor authentication. If you're not familiar with the term, it's when you require to enter additional data in addition to your password. Username and password, it's one form of authentication, and when you need to receive a text or you scan with a mobile phone, some applications for dual-factor authentication. And especially it's important for admin users who have a right to modify anything on your website. For other roles like commenter or just simple user subscriber, it's maybe less important, but the more privileges user gets, the more better to have better security there. And two-factor authentication has entered our lives. And if you didn't meet yet, it's a matter of time until you meet. And it improves security dramatically. It's another way to authenticate that you is you. And only you can modify some things. Disable XML RPC authentication. That's the file which we talked about, and the secondly affected file. You can just remove that file, simply remove from your installation, or some plugins actually disable this authentication. Highly recommend to do that. If you're not relying on that functionality, which would be installed on your, for example, mobile phone WordPress app, and allows you to edit kind of offline your WordPress. Adding recaptcha on login pages and comment pages and contact us pages, it's another security measures you can do. But since this is about login security, it's that's why we specify only this. Limiting failed login attempts. For example, after 3 or 5 or 10 failed login attempts, you can block it for a few hours, that this user actually cannot log in. And then if you set up password expiration, don't set up it too often. This is maybe a last thing I would suggest, because people usually have a password fatigue, too many passwords, they don't know what to start with. Better to enable two-factor authentication rather than forcing people to reset their password too often. Otherwise, they will not know how to log in at all. So you see, if you do all of this, will anybody break into your login security? You're saying no, but I actually don't be that certain. Don't be that certain. There is no other way. It's, for example, there are advanced attack where it's supply chain attack, where you actually install some plugins which have a backdoor into them, and hacker able to remote to your site that way. There were a few cases where unknown plugins were bought or inherited by hackers who embedded backdoor into those plugins, and after update on different sites, suddenly a hacker had access to many sites. So this is what implies by supply chain attack, where you actually intentionally install plugin, but plugin is malicious itself. And it's this is the hardest attack to be protected from. It is possible by controlling outgoing connections from your site, but it is tricky. I know if people don't use to this information and this terminology, it can be completely overwhelming. And I get that. Yet just be patient. We'll have a very few simple steps to follow. Right now, I'm still trying to educate you in general about security. Applies to WordPress specifically. Web application firewall, it's another term you need to be familiar with. And it's a special type of firewall that filters, monitors, blocks HTTP traffic to and from a web service. As opposite to network firewall, for example, or a host firewall, which sometimes just either blocks the communication or allows communication. Web application firewall need to allow some communication, which are valid requests, and block other malicious requests. So you understand that it's very tricky part, and it's not easy to detect which one is malicious, which one is valid. And yet when service needs to be available online for everybody to be able to connect, including hackers, who is, as soon as anything connected, they do attack it. And how do you block there? And this is where whole industry is developing, where you just have to have web application firewall. It's not enough just to do static security. So, and web application firewall can sit on different levels, actually. It can sit on your WordPress site. And this is what we'll be talking mainly about. But also web application firewall can apply to other levels, like on Apache web server, there's a mod security web application firewall. If you have next generation network firewall, it has advanced features which are referring to sorry, something happened with my site. You could see shared screen. Okay, sorry, technical glitch. Computers usually don't work as you want them to. So next generation firewall, it's another level. And there's even better ways, but most expensive way to have a midway remote providers like Cloudflare, Imperva, Cloudflare, Akamai. It's removed from your hosting server, and it sits in between user and your hosting server. And usually they have a whole distribution network. It's not just one server, but actually several which sits in between you, and traffic can flow different ways. It's usually combined with content delivery networks as well. So those providers can mitigate much bigger denial of service attacks than some other ways. Yet, all of those layers could be needed and valuable. It's security in general treated as layers. You try to implement as many layers as economically possible and hope that nothing happens. But there is almost no limit to security. And there are many ways to achieve the same thing. So there are many different plugins available there, which can, they compete in functionality. They have the same functionality, different ways. I'm not saying they're all the same, they're all different. Yet some functionality just repeats within them. So by this, what I'm saying, there's not one way of fixing security. You can research these plugins, for example, and I have my personal preference, what we use here. My preference actually for our website, idsecure.com, actually, it's also built on WordPress. At some point, we had it on Drupal, but I migrated it to WordPress at some point. So WordFence is my preferred way, primarily because of web application firewall, how they deploy some rules in real time to all their network. I think they do the best job in that regard. And other functions, they're comparable to other things, but web application firewall, because it's tricky to detect, to block real-time the hackers. This is why I give my preference to WordFence. And it is a freemium. So what it means is there is a free version and there is a paid version. With free version, you get functionality, but it's limited. And then if you want more security, you have to upgrade. All in one WordPress security and firewall. This is the best free version available. It has a lot of functionality. It has a lot of overlap with WordFence. Like in terms of web application firewall rules, it's fairly static. They don't change that much. So that's partially, if you for sure know you're not gonna invest into paid, you can install this. You can install, in some cases, both plugins, WordFence and all-in-one VP security. But functionality is so much overlapping that I'm not sure whether it's worth it. And there are some other plugins to complement WordFence security if any functionality is missing. Another plugin which I could mention, Security, and also freemium model. You get something for free. If you want more security, it's paid. It's also a very good plugin, and it's their web application firewall rules comparable to WordFence. Yet my preference is WordFence. And other plugins over there, you can study, compare them more in case you choose them to select. Second group is not in order of my preference. I just mentioned it here. And there are many other plugins which I didn't mention here, which also refers to security, but they're either single function plugins. They're not as complex, let's say. So here's the practical part. I encourage you, log into your WordPress site right now. And even if you just do one improvement today, it's much better to improve something rather than just knowing about it. So knowing about it, it doesn't help security. It's only when you apply your knowledge and you actually do something, then it improves. So protect your website by changing login URL and prevent access to vplogin.php page, which is default, and VP admin directory while not logged in. It's just powerful. If it's a simple thing you're gonna do today, just do this. It comes with its complexity because you actually have to communicate to other admin users that your URL has changed and they need to stop using previous bookmark. They need to create a new bookmark for login URL because it will not be visible online. And it's good to protect from hackers that way. And yet you need to remember, record it very well, what your new login URL is. Because you can lock yourself out even with this. If you didn't record properly what your login URL is, you changed it, you forgot about it, and next thing you know, you have to recover from database or some other manipulations. So please log into your WordPress site. In plugins, go add new plugin and type VPS hide login. And you'll find through search that plugin. It's very simple, install it. While configuring, I encourage you to put any URL, completely random numbers, and go ahead and save it. Save it. Try to record it. Try to send it immediately to somebody because you don't want to be locked out. Redirection URL, we chose for 4-page. You might choose another page, but I don't see a reason why you would want another page. Another plugin I encourage you to do right now is a simple history. Simple history, it gives you a trace what has happened on your site lately. Last day, last 7 days, 14 days, and so forth. So you can see actually, even if a hacker got hold of your site, somehow they managed. Through this plugin, you actually see what they changed and when. Hopefully you don't need, you install this plugin, Simple History, and you don't ever need to know about it, kind of, or use, but yet it's very helpful. Even when other admins are changing things on your website, you can see who changed and what changed. So go ahead. It's also goes to plugin, add a new plugin, Simple History, and it's activate plugin. So it's very simple steps. Unfortunately, I have to keep going because there is still information to capture. Simple Google Recapture. It's another plugin. It's a powerful way from Google to distinguish bot against humans. And on this plugin, there is more configuration needed at the Google site. When you go google.com recapture, and you'll see how to do on Google sites this recapture. And then you'll get a site key and secret key. And so additional configuration is needed. If you don't have this, I don't think you can accomplish this during this webinar. And we'll keep going, but you'll have to come back to this and configure it. And you can enable this. There are many plugins for recapture. Feel free to choose yours. This one integrates with Contact 7 form, which is a popular form for contacts. And there are other ways like login on a login page, login for comments, reset passwords. So to verify that you're human. Some sites start even requiring recapture before anybody lands on your website, just to confirm that it's not a bot. Because primarily it's actually bots scrolling through different sites. Another big deal, if you have installed recapture, that's great. And we'll come back to finish the reconfiguring. Install Wordpress plugin. That's my preferred plugin. I recommend it. You can choose to install any other security plugins. You go to plugin, add new plugin, type Wordpress. And I'm showing you an icon for this plugin and company. It has many functionalities which you'll have to explore on your own at some point, go through different settings there. You go ahead and activate Wordpress plugin. And from sidebar, then you can go to dashboards, and you probably prompted to enter your email for sending security updates. For example, if Wordpress detects something on your site, or it keeps blocking some URLs and you want to know about it, that Wordpress actually does something on your site, blocks it. So enter email which you will check. Login security and enable 2FA. Once again, many plugins offer 2FA security plugins. And through Wordpress, it's one way of enabling it. And you go to login security, settings tab, and then enable 2FA. Two-factor authentication, it needs to be set up on both sides. It means on the server and also on your smartphone to be able to scan the code. And if you're not familiar with 2FA, it's a little bit of learning curve, but it's worth it these days. Password, even strong passwords, are considered to be not enough already for modern day attacks. Check enable 2FA for administrators, authors, and editors. Those are more privileged roles within WordPress. Up to you whether you want to, for subscribers, to enable it or not. Check require 2FA for all administrators. That actually it's enforced 2FA. It would become not optional. Feel free to specify a grace period for how many days you allow all administrators to get on board with 2FA. Allow remembering device for 30 days. So I recommend that option. It does weakens security a little bit, but it minimizes the burden of 2FA authentication, because now in addition to password, you need to do additional thing on your phone. And if you remember this device, it doesn't feel as much of the burden. Check disable XML RPC authentication. If a XML RPC is not being used by a WordPress site, or you can delete that file altogether. And click Save Your Settings. So this is a recommended procedure. Feel free to review all the settings there. There are a lot of settings there. And now you need to set up Google Authenticator app on your phone to be able to enable 2FA, to scan the code and enable 2FA. So ask all admins to install Google Authenticator. Try to go to Login Security, Two-Factor Authentication tab in Wordpress. And then you'll see a code to scan. Open Google Authenticator on your phone. Attempt to scan it. And then you'll be required to enter the code which shown on your site, and for you to be able to activate it for the first time. It's a one way of verification that actually it's set up, that you're entering the right code and everything is ready for you not to be locked out from your own site. There is a way to disable plugins through database. In case of disaster, it all happens, but we don't want disasters while improving security. There is a first scan you need to do. Then to perform first WordFence scan, you go to WordFence scan, start a new scan, and it scans for all the improvements possible you need to do, identifies different files which suspected to be malicious. Sometimes there are false positives, so you need to be inspecting files in case they're refers as malicious. But it will identify many issues which we talked about. And it's all automated. That's the beauty of these plugins. Refresh web application rules. They will be refreshed automatically eventually, but on the first, you can do it manually. Goes to WordPress, all options, advanced firewall options, and you'll see a button, manually refresh rules. and it's referred to the special rules from Wordpress network, which blocks attacks. I do recommend for people to sign up for paid version of Wordpress if the site is critical, and only you can decide. The costs vary, depends, but let's say $100 per year. For critical sites, it is reasonable. And feel free to review all other Wordpress settings. It will take you some time to review it and needs to be taken as a project. But yet, once it's done, it's configured, and you can be more sure that nothing bad happens. Another thing to keep your WordPress and plugins up to date. It's something you need to do, yet I understand all the pain of security. It's you work a lot and nothing happens. But that's why you actually work for security, that to prevent that something would happen. And updating WordPress can be tricky sometimes, and they're still trying to improve compatibility of different plugins with core. Sometimes updates break functionality, so you do need to make sure that you have backup to recover from those even threats. But there is through dashboards, you can go to updates, update to the latest version for core files for WordPress. And then you can remove all inactive plugins and update all active plugins. And check functionality after updates. So if I didn't lose you before, I describe all the security layers here. I'm not going to get even attempted to go through it. Some responsibilities goes for website maintainer, some for hosting provider, and some could be shared. And you need to determine, ultimately you're responsible for your site, and you need to make sure that shared responsibilities are covered and your hosting provider does what they need to do. There are different hosting options. Not all hosting is the same. There is a shared web hosting. Sometimes there is a shared web hosting with partial VPN access for management, like SSH access or FTP access. Or there is a private version, private server for you, where your website doesn't sit with other sites on the same server and could be partially accessible through VPN. All these different protection layers, they have a different cost structure. And it depends how critical is the site. Other best practices: don't leave zip backups in your public HTML directory. Just make sure that you're installing only trusted extensions and plugins. Enforce HTTPS for transport security. Rename admin user name if it exists. So there are many other ways how you can improve security. There are many follow-ups also after this webinar. If you did what we attempted to do during the webinar, you need to follow up on sending URL to all admin users, enable 2FA for admin users, review options for security plugin, sign up for reCAPTCHA, make sure that you have automatic daily backups for at least 30 days. Resolved all the found issues after first WordFence scan, and make sure that your WordPress and plugins are up to date. I know it has been a lot of information, but hopefully you'll learn something. And I hope you'll stay secure and avoid any incidents, because it's much easier to prevent security incidents rather than to recover from it. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope you learned something. Goodbye.